Hi and welcome to Check Your Thread, the podcast that will help you sew more sustainably. My name's Zoe and I'm obsessed with sewing. I've been blogging about it for over 14 years and am the creator and host of the popular handmade wardrobe challenge, Me Made May. But like many people, I've become increasingly concerned about the climate crisis and the way that my lifestyle contributes to it. So in this podcast, I'll be nerding out about making clothes whilst exploring how to minimise the negative impact that it may have. I really hope you'll join me in this journey. So this week, I'm mixing things up and bringing you an episode of an entirely different podcast. So let me introduce to you Garmology, a podcast made by Nick Johannessen, aka Well Dressed Dad. If you've ever tried to repair any outdoor wear or equipment, or feel that it may be in your future, this conversation would be particularly relevant to you. But even if it's not something that's on your radar, I'm sure you'll find Nick's conversation with repair expert Rosanna Watson to be truly fascinating. So please stay tuned for that. Are you doing okay today, lovely listener? What's going on with you? I'm doing pretty well at the moment. If you ever want an electronic chit-chat, you can find me on Instagram at checkyourthread, or you can email me, zoe@checkyourthread.com. Thanks everyone who left lovely feedback on last week's episode with Pornima from Kundakala. Chow Linda Sews on Instagram kindly took the time to leave a comment. They said, "Wow, this was such an inspirational and impactful episode, Zoe. Thanks for the great podcast." Well, thank you for listening. I really appreciate receiving feedback on the episodes I'm putting out, be that what you particularly enjoyed about an episode or what you feel could be improved going forward. Please do reach out if you have anything you'd like to say to help me make this better going forwards. So are you up to any making at the moment? Since last week, I refashioned an old jersey dress of mine into a nightdress for my daughter. I also made myself a little sleeveless top out of some scraps of Joni Viscose that I found in my stash. I'm actually pretty well off for hot weather clothing, but I recently found that one of my sleeveless tank tops has become way too small, so I guess I'm operating a loose one-in, one-out policy with summer clothes. My other sewing activity this week is also my sustainability win for the week. I've cut out an enormous batch of hankies for my fabric to use instead of paper tissues. I've cut out 18 from a length of soft cotton fabric that I thrifted like a million years ago. I've been meaning to do this for ages, since the previous batch I made a few years ago have basically disintegrated by now. But recently, previous podcast guest Judith Staley posted about her recent fabric hanky makes and totally jogged me into action. I posted about my plans on Instagram and commenters convinced me to try a rolled hem on my overlocker to finish the edges. And I must say that it's been working a charm. It's much quicker than the double folded hems that I was planning on doing. So these 18 extra hankies should keep us all going, reducing our need to buy boxes of disposable tissues. Unless we all have stinking colds at the same time, perhaps. This week, a huge thanks goes to Vicky, Sarah and Lois for signing up to support the podcast via Patreon. You are all awesome and your support is incredibly gratefully received. If you feel you could spare the cost of a cup of coffee each month to help keep this podcast going, please find the link in the show notes or on the website checkyourthread.com. Right, so let me tell you a bit more about what you're going to hear today and why I think you should hear it. As I say, instead of an episode created by me, you'll be listening to a previously published episode of Garmology. Garmology's website says that it's a podcast about clothes and stuff. Menswear, fashion, ethical and sustainably made, old and new, from a perspective of making, buying, wearing, collecting, evaluating and appreciating. With regular co-hosts and interesting guests, the aim is to provide a view of what we might wear and what we should wear if we knew more about it. Expect plenty of opinions. So, to be honest, I can't remember where I heard about this podcast, but I think it was a recommendation via Instagram. Apologies and big thanks if it was you who switched me onto it. Anyway, I listened to this episode whilst I was ill in bed a couple of months ago, and it honestly kind of knocked my socks off. It was so completely fascinating. Nick's guest, Rosanna, was super knowledgeable and engaging, and Nick's questions showed what an intelligent and skillful podcaster he is. I'm probably the least outdoorsy person you're likely to meet, yet I was so engrossed in this episode. When it was finished, my next thought was, Check Your Thread listeners need to hear this. So rather than simply promote it on Instagram, which may reach about 70 people, I actually approached Nick to see if he would engage in a feed swap, and he agreed. A feed swap is when two podcasts put an episode of each other's up on their feeds, so listeners get to hear something different. I learnt about feed swaps a while back, but I hadn't been tempted to try and rig one up until I heard this episode. I hope you enjoy this experiment, and I'd love to hear what you think. Okay, enjoy!
Hello, dear listener, and welcome to this week's episode of Garmology, the podcast about clothes and stuff. If you'd like to support the podcast, please leave a review on Apple Podcasts, send me an email to say hi, tell your friends about the good listen. In the meantime, let's head off to Wales and learn more about repairing outdoor gear. Hi, and welcome to another episode of Garmology, a podcast about clothes and stuff. Now, today, the clothes take us outdoors, and my guest is Rosanna from England. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, I am actually in Wales, and I'm Scottish.
There you go.
So, go UK. And I am a little bit Norwegian as well. My name's Rosanna. I run Snowdonia Gear Repair based in North Wales. We specialise in outdoor equipment and clothing, so I still do a lot of backpacks, tents, that sort of thing. I started fairly recently on my own, back in June last year, but before that I worked for a company doing in-house repairs there. And before that I was an engineer, but discovered pretty quickly I didn't like sitting at a desk. So one way or another I've ended up in repairs. My other half's from here, he's from Llanberis, just at the foot of Snowdon, and we were visiting there one day and I'd got back into sewing. I've always sewn, but I kind of got back into it over lockdown and then sat up in the night and went, oh my gosh, outdoor gear repair. It's technical stuff, but it's creative and it's design as well, and it's working with your hands, and yeah, it's just kind of gone from there. And we're bonkers busy now with it being winter. So yeah, growing faster than I thought it would.
I thought gear repair was a very, very clever name. And it's been sort of going round and round in my mind all day.
We kept thinking about, I was going to call it Fix It for a bit, like the Norwegian to fix something. And then I thought I was just being too clever. And I thought, what's the most Googleable thing? So that's why it's Snowdonia Gear Repair. So I thought, you're in Snowdonia and you need some gear repaired. There you go. You're just going to Google it. So
yeah. So the type of gear you repair, you mentioned outdoors, it's tents, backpacks, and all manners of outdoor wear?
Mainly jackets, waterproof jackets and insulated jackets. Obviously we're in quite a rainy part of the world, so we get a mix of normal insulated or a synthetic insulated and down. And then after that, it's just a complete mix. I've no idea what's coming through the door. A few backpacks, although they're often quite expensive to repair and last a long time, whereas like the newer jackets, I think, tend to have, quite often I get them and they're about 3 to 5 years old. And then I get a lot of, it really depends on the weather. If it's snowy, I get salopettes. And as soon as anybody gets the crampons out, with crampons, you're always tearing your trousers. People tear the kick plate. Quite often, it's really funny because you'll get they'll have put a kick plate on it, and then you'll get tears all around the outside of the kick plate. So it'll come in the post and just say, "Can you double the size for my big feet?" But
when I found you initially on Instagram, I was very encouraged to see that there was actually a business in this and that people were having their stuff repaired. Because we seem to live in times when people basically just throw stuff out all the time.
I've had people be skeptical, and it's really interesting sometimes. I'll speak to someone on a Saturday, like a family friend, and they'll be like, "Oh, sewing in the UK, no, that's been sent offshore years ago. There's no money in that anymore." And then on Monday, I'll come in and I'll have this email, can you repair these 5 items? And I'll send them a quote back, and it's like 40 quid an item or something, and they send an email back, excellent, I'm so excited, thank you so much, as soon as possible please. So you get people questioning whether it's even my dad, who has had a business and is in manufacturing but with food himself. I think because there's people perceive sewing to be so cheap, but with outdoor gear, 2 things. One, it's actually really expensive in the first place, and it is quite expensive for what you get. When you're buying a lightweight jacket or Gore-Tex trousers or something, you can spend over £400, and if you're going to wear it every day, if you're like an outdoor instructor, or even if you're going to wear it really heavily, so if you're going to go on like an extended trip for 2 weeks, you're not going to wash it. It's probably not going to last. You're not, for £400, you're not, I think people kind of, I don't know, I'd say for a jacket, £50 to £100 a year, at least. So suddenly £40 for a repair, which means you don't need to buy another one for another 2 or 3 years, is well worth it. And there's a lot more work than I thought there would be in alterations. And that's alterations because it doesn't fit, or can you add something or take away something that I just don't agree with what the designer's done. And I think at the beginning, I didn't think I had anything on Arc'teryx. There's this team of Swiss designers that have been through the mill, gone to, technical university or whatever. They're professional ice climbers who get, testing their kit. I thought there's no way I'm going to come up with a clever solution to something. But the industry's gone so global now that you're buying stuff from a company in Canada. So it's not specific to North Wales. So they might not have thought about your specific use, and it might not fit you. Because again, we've gone so global with stuff. The chance of it fitting you is even less than it used to be.
Yeah. You mentioned that there probably weren't many people sewing in the UK any longer. And I guess the once pretty strong UK outdoor wear industry has also gone the way of low-cost countries now. Is there anything left being made in the UK?
There's so much more than you think. When I started, I thought there was no British manufacturing, and there's masses. There's still masses, like there's a lot of factories that, Paramo still makes some, I think. Buffalo definitely still make in Sheffield. They just haven't changed. There's smaller companies like, he's not that small, but Aguil Alpine in the Lakes. But there's also new companies, Atom Packs up in the Lake District. I don't know in statistics wise how fast he's grown, but he's gone from strength to strength. He has quite a team of seamstresses now. So there's actually new factories opening, and not just cottage industry, out in the shed in the back, but proper factories, earning people earning a decent wage and a serious production facility. I think it's got so expensive, the gear's got so expensive that it is feasible again, I guess, with shipping and things going up. But also, there's a growing gap between design and manufacturing knowledge. I don't know if I'm skipping ahead a bit here, we're going to talk about this later, but the people who design don't necessarily know how to sew. And I think sometimes what happens is, I don't know, because I haven't been in the industry making stuff, but just this is from taking things apart and following, getting the email subscriptions from sewing machine manufacturers and stuff. And getting emails now of, do you want a tech pack? We'll make you 20 tech packs, just send us a drawing. And that means you're not specifying how the thing's put together. And you can really tell when you get an old Carrymore on the table, the old hot ice ones that we get loads of them here because they did a collaboration with the Joe Brown's shops. And because I think they used to sponsor one of the outdoor centres as well. So there's a lot of the old stuff kicking around, and you sit that right next to a brand new bag that's been made in China. The Chinese bag has just been put together in the quickest way possible, not in the most durable way possible. And there's such a long chain between the designer who actually understands climbing or actually understands the outdoors, the person who decides how the thing's going to get put together, and the person who then manufactures it. It's such a long chain that I think back in the day when you had someone in the caramel factory, it wasn't such a long stretch between concept and production. I don't know if that makes sense.
Have you got any good examples of these matters?
Well, I've actually got one here, but the caramel, it's just so simple. It's been put together probably not in the fastest way possible, but in the most efficient way possible with the fabric. So I unpicked an old caramel hot ice and laid it out on the table, and got all the pieces arranged, and they measured exactly the width of a roll of fabric. And it's just put together so sensibly, and you can tell they've actually thought about where it's going to wear out and how you're going to get to it.
So you mentioned old Carrymore as a quality, I suppose, vintage make. I see a lot of old down jackets are having a moment now, becoming suddenly very popular again, and it's quite surprising to see how many there are still around.
Yeah, an awful lot. It's I think two things. It's one, it's a testament to how long that type of fabric lasts, and two, just how many were made in the first place. I went into
that, of course.
Yeah, I went into Liverpool the other day, and the upper floor of a vintage shop was just fully stocked with Patagonia and North Face. And then, I don't know if you've seen, Rab have started doing their old vintage logo. They've reprinted their old logo. I think what happened is someone told me this, so it might not be true, but they found a reel of the old labels and sewed them onto some hats or something, and people went mad for it. So they've, brought them back again. I guess trends just come around, but yeah, outdoor is in and vintage is in. So outdoor vintage is, by default in, I think.
And it also kind of proves my point that there are warehouses around where old stuff is just stacked high, waiting for its moment to arrive again.
There is,
and they can just ship it out.
Yeah, there is so much stuff. I struggle now to go into shops because I was having this conversation with someone the other day, and they said, it must motivate you so much. You go into work every day and you save an item from landfill. And I'll save, on a good day, 5 to 6 items if it's, if I'm being quick, or if they're easy jobs. And how many items have been produced in those 12 hours? It's quite terrifying just how much stuff there is already in the world, let alone that's being made. But I do think, I say it all the time, we'll be digging stuff out of the ground soon. But I think with outdoor gear, especially the old stuff, is worth every penny. I read something the other day that said, our generation, what we'll be remembered for, we look back at Victorian dresses, or we look back at Edwardian, and we have bits and pieces. We've got an old corset and that goes in a museum. And what will we have? What will people be looking at in a museum that belongs to us? It was quite a depressing thought. I don't know, not quite sure.
Skinny jeans with elastic fabric or something like that.
Have you seen that pair of jeans that they buried?
Yes, I've shared it a few times, and people keep asking, what is this alien object?
Yeah.
But
it's quite interesting.
I don't think many people have sort of really understood how awful those things are. Speaking of old items, though, how old are the oldest pieces you get to repair?
I've literally just this morning put a zip in a mountain hardware jacket that was 20 years old. I have repaired things older than me. I am now 28. One of my favourite ones was an old Jaguar backpack, a big green thing. I think it was green because they actually did stuff for the military. I think that's how Caramel got big. And, I'm not sure how it contributed to their growth, but one of the ways. And he proudly slapped it on the counter and went, this broke down Heathrow's baggage claim for 2 hours. And it was the strap, the classic, the strap had got caught. And and then we carried on talking, and he said it was older than his kid and his oldest daughter, and turned out she's older than me. So
I mean, stuff can last if you just take a little care of it, I guess.
Oh, no, this one had not been taken care of at all. It was just bomb-proof. It was literally designed for the military, and he'd taken it everywhere with him. Bits of it were shredded and other bits were completely intact. It was really impressive. You know, the wear, you can tell it's just been used so many times. You know, when you get like a really nice denim and it's just been worn, and you can tell how many times that person's knelt on that one little bit of fabric. I think a lot of people are quite hard on themselves with outdoor gear, and I think it has got more complicated to look after it, all textiles in general, because we've got so many types of textiles now. And there was the whole revolution of ease of use. Like, we moved away from silk, we moved away from wool, we moved to synthetics. So suddenly everything became really easy to use. So now we just assume that you can bung it in the washing machine. But I think we're also told a lot of the time things are returned to a company for warranty, to a brand, and people say, oh, I only did this with it. I only put it in the washing machine at 30, or I only used it a handful of times. And the brand will come back to you and say, oh yeah, but you didn't though, did you? You washed it too hard or whatever. They're kind of pushing the blame back on you, because a lot of the time I'll get people, there's a really common repair, the hem. If you look at any outdoor gear business, if you look through their Instagram far enough, they'll have a photo of an Arc'teryx hem or cuffs where the glues come apart. Really, really common repair. I don't know why they've not fixed it. They're so good as a company at, designing for fit, and they really pride themselves on their technical ability, and just this one thing they haven't fixed. But customers will come to me and say, oh, I can't believe I've messed with my really expensive jacket. It's all my fault. And it can't be just your fault, because it's happened to everybody. So either you're all making the same mistake, which the company should kind of identify and say, right, we need to make it so that we can wash it at 30, because this is ridiculous, assuming that this many people are going to have a machine that goes down to 15 degrees. Or it's a manufacturing fault or a design fault, and they just won't admit it to you.
Is part of the problem that older gear was made by humans, whilst newer gear is sort of more machine-made and glued together, less sewn?
It's part of it. It is difficult sometimes what the machine can do, but I think even if it was a person, even if the glue machine was being operated by hand, it's the speed. It's not the... I don't know, because I've never stood in a factory in China. But you can tell... do you know what bias binding is? I'm assuming. When you bind an edge. Yeah. You can tell now a lot of things are bound in one go rather than individual pieces being bound, or they'll do all the overlocking in one step, which actually isn't quickest on your own, because it's quite awkward to do. But if you've got a machine that guides you round, and you've got a huge factory where you've got to trudge, however many a kilometre away, because these factories are so huge, it makes sense to do it in those steps. But I read something in one of my very old dressmaking books that says, if it looks well made, it's durable. If it's durable, it'll look well done. Sewing that looks good usually is well done. It's that simple. If you look at it and go, oh, yeah, that looks neat. And I think it's just speed. They're just trying to get the processes as fast as possible. And I think sometimes what happens is a factory will come up with a faster process. They'll sell it to a brand. The brand will convince the designer, and the designer will then come and convince everybody. And then it'll come up and say, we've spent years developing this magic glued seam just for you, and we finally got the machine to do it. And it's actually happened in reverse. They've invented the machine and then sold it to you. Right. It's not actually the best way. It looks really neat for the first 3 months, and then lo and behold, the whole thing falls apart.
Yeah. So if we're thinking of down jackets or jackets in general, say over the last 50 years, what have been the most significant developments and changes in it?
I mean, I haven't been a designer in the industry, so I can only speak from the broken things I've seen.
That's the interesting bit.
Yeah. I'd say most of all it's gone lightweight. A lot of things are now glued, like you said, pockets. Zips have all gone a size or two down. So the one I was talking about this morning had a size 8 zip, which is practically unheard of now on the main zip, and size 5 on the pockets. I'm now getting jackets where the main zip is a size 3. So everything's gone smaller, even on the things that aren't necessarily marketed as lightweight. I think because it feels nice when you put something on and it doesn't weigh a lot. It's actually nice to wear something that's not heavy on you. That's why a lot of people get put off wool, I think. But obviously it doesn't last as long. They flipped a lot of the zips over. I think we care more about look than we used to. Although there were kind of the snazzy colours in the 80s and 90s, I think a lot of design has changed to make things look sleeker, like everything's more hidden. And I think we've got some changes coming up. I don't know if you've seen them yet, a lot of down jackets and insulated jackets now, the baffles are being glued together, which I've heard. I haven't seen any in for repair yet, but I've heard from other repair shops that they do not last, and as soon as they go, all of the down just falls to the bottom. It's not just about assuming that the thing will break. It's thinking about what's going to happen when it does break. So old jackets often had like a fail-safe. So the pockets, if the zips went, they either had like a Velcro flap, or even just the pocket was sewn in a way that there was a bit of fabric covering it. So if the zip broke, the whole thing didn't just fall apart. But nowadays, when one seam, often they'll on the inside panel, instead of having a separate chest pocket and waist pocket, it'll actually be one piece of fabric that's just either glued or sewn across in one line. So when that piece fails, the whole inside of your jacket fails, which is making it quicker, but also making it lighter. Plus the materials have got more expensive.
Yeah. Now, I was a teenager in the mid-80s, and I can still remember the down jackets of the time, or the sort of super desirable down jacket that all the rich kids had. It was the Fjällräven Expedition, which was, it was huge, but also the down baffles they weren't sewn right through, so it had equal insulation all over. You didn't have the sort of seams, meaning that your insulation varied all the time. Okay. And that was such a good jacket. They still make it today, although now they make it in a light version as well, because it is a beast. But that seemed to me that was kind of a pinnacle of down jackets, and no one ever really made or evolved on from there. It was just always, I think most of them are so sort of fashion orientated.
I'm really interested. I'm really interested what's happening now with the way fashion is affecting outdoor gear, because it's becoming so trendy. Somebody was telling me just a few days ago, they used to work at Platt & Brennan, and one of the reps came by and said, "What do you think of the gear?" And he said, "Do you genuinely feed this stuff back to designers?" And he said, "Do you want me to be really honest? Absolutely not, because you're 2% of the market." Apparently they sold loads of stuff in Japan, anything with a British logo, with the Union Jack on it. British logo, British flag. Not everything's a brand. Sells for loads in Japan. There's a lot of people just buying it as fashion. I definitely think one trend, everything's got shorter. Sleeves have got shorter, and actual waist length as well. Just in general in the clothes that we wear, if you think of the old waterproof jackets, they were all cinched in at the waist, and then they went well past the hip. And modern stuff is a much, not boxier fit, but like finishes at the hip. It doesn't come in it just comes in with the cut, not with like a drawstring. So you've got less of a waist pull in. I don't know if that's because we've all got rounder, but it's a bit weird that things have got shorter because people have actually got taller. So somebody I spoke to who used to work in a shop, he was convinced they were just doing it because it was cheaper, because it was less fabric, and because people buy stuff online now, the weight difference matters in grams. If you're standing in a shop looking at 2 items, you're going to be more bothered about the colour or the feel of the item than you are about 2 grams. Also, you're not, you're going to be holding them and you're going to say, I can't feel 2 grams. But when you're searching online, you might want to sort by weight, or, because you can see the number. You go, I'll go for that one because it's the lightest one. So we've been really, really driven by weight recently. I'd say in the last 5 years.
I wonder a bit about whether it's also related to, say, if I was buying outdoor gear in 1980, it was because I was generally going outdoors and had some plans to go exploring. But I think a lot of people buying, say, down jackets and a lot of outdoor gear now are buying it because they're sort of cosplaying the great explorer look, and they're not actually going farther than the parking lot.
Yeah, definitely. There's a lot of people who wear it around the shops. But I also think outdoor gear has because it's become so much lighter, and because, and it's hard to say people have got richer because it doesn't feel like it at the moment, but people's buying power has increased. This stuff didn't used to be accessible to the masses, and now it is. And actually, a down jacket's quite nice. It keeps you really warm. You get out of the car on a cold day and walk into the office, down jacket's actually lovely, and it's really light. And Gore-Tex is great because you don't sweat, so when you walk into a shopping centre and they've got those huge heated fans, you don't immediately get drenched in sweat. So actually, outdoor gear is quite nice. It's made to be comfortable, but when a lot of those people start buying the stuff, I think, then it might affect the design of it. And now we might end up with a jacket that's more suited to just the short trek between the car and the office. I don't know. It's difficult because it's still marketed and sold as, here's, someone at the top of Everest in this wonderful jacket. You should buy it now, even if you're only walking your dog in it. So I don't know how. I think probably a lot of it is just on what they sell. I know there's a lot of products that people have brought in for me and said, can you copy this? They don't make this anymore, and I don't know why. A really common reason that they don't carry on. So outdoor gear, because it's fitted to the human body and doesn't try and make the body look different like a lot of fashion does, it looks rubbish on a hanger, which makes it really hard to sell in a shop. So again, online can kind of swing that because you see a photo of someone wearing it, but something might just get discontinued because they couldn't sell it because it looked rubbish on a hanger, not because it wasn't incredibly comfy when you put it on. So the feedback isn't as simple as, here's a product we've made, do you like it? Yes, we do. Brilliant, we'll make some more. It's often so many other factors apart from that.
Now, I've been very curious about the evolution of synthetics in outdoor wear, because there was a time when it was all waxed cotton or various versions of cotton and down, and then we started getting all the Gore-Tex and the synthetic outers and all the synthetic fillings. How have they stood up? Do you get an impression of that through repairs?
I've got a jacket, which is a Nordmann ski jacket that was my mum's. And she bought it. I think she might have sold a kayak to buy it when she was in her 20s. And I wore that when I was in Norway, and people stopped me in the street, and I wore it in Britain and people laughed at me. Everybody in Norway, oh my God, that thing is amazing. And it's an incredible jacket. It's had, I think, at least 4 zips on it now. But it's so durable, but it's really heavy and it's pretty grubby. So yeah, it's the old stuff is amazing, and it's kind of sad that we've moved to synthetics, but they hold up very well for the first few years, which I think also means they get a lot of use. It depends. Again, it's all a balance. If you want something that's lightweight, it's not always going to last as long. It still does last a surprising amount of time. I think the things that really shock me are things that have been made in the last 5 years, or even more recently than that, there's fabrics now that I can't re-sew. So usually, well, I've got a whole mix of methods for putting in new zips. But for waterproofs, I'll usually unpick them. Now, anyway, lots of different methods. But some of the newer ones, you can actually see the insulation through the fabric, and I can't unpick them. I'll just end up with too many holes. So those fabrics, they're so thin that it's actually hard to repair them, because it's hard to put them through the sewing machine. I think the biggest change I heard on a podcast the other day about how we've just had the last shipment of DWR fabrics of a specific coating that's now been banned.
The fluorocarbon.
Which has now just been outright banned. And that's going to
years ago, but
well, no, this is the last shipment. Obviously, it's got banned, and then it takes a while to get through the system. So
let us just make a few more million of them.
Yeah, so that's the fabric. So there's still going to be, it's a while till the jackets get here. But without those coatings, Gore-Tex and a lot of the other synthetic fabrics aren't going to work, because they don't hold up well when they get saturated with the grease. So we're about to go through another materials revolution. We've had the synthetic one, and now we're going to have to either relearn how to take care of the synthetic stuff. But a lot of the reason that it lasts is the coatings. So I had something a few weeks ago that was an eco-friendly coating, and the fabric was beginning to feel thin in parts, and the customer hadn't washed it that much. We are so used to, if you imagine putting your jacket through what you put your t-shirt through, it would stink. It would be so grubby. We've got used to these coatings. So we're going to have to relearn how to look after our stuff. And we might actually find out that Gore-Tex is great until it doesn't have a toxic coating on it. And suddenly canvas actually fares better again, because either it doesn't last a long time, or it just gets so grubby so quick it stops working, because the way it works, it needs the pores through it, and if they get clogged up, you just end up a hot mess.
I suppose you could wax your Gore-Tex, go old school on it.
I don't know how breathable. I don't know if that would.
You'd say
the opposite,
breathing,
or just give up and accept that it's a wax jacket. But it is also becoming trendy. I am seeing older fabrics coming back a bit now.
Ones would they be?
Well, I think the Fjallraven stuff is definitely becoming a bit more trendy, and wax smocks are kind of back in a kind of a niche market, I think. Ventile. I went to a fabric expo in London, and Ventile had a massive stand there. And I said, are you busy? And he said they really struggled to get, because the cotton's so specific for it. They struggle to get hold of it anyway, but now everybody wants organic as well. That's even harder to come by. So, yeah, I think the old...
Ventile also ran into a little bit of a problem with a certain podcaster and blogger who was a bit upset about them using DWR on the old Ventile.
Yeah.
And hence lying about both where it was being made and why it was waterproof. But now, of course, it is Swiss, and they have made an eco version, so...
I'm really curious how it...
podcaster is more accepting.
I've actually got a few rolls of the old Evil stuff, and I'm going to keep some and compare it to the new. I'm really curious how it... I'm going to throw oil at it and just see how it wears. I'm really interested. I thought I've got a jacket in the mix anyway for my other half. I was going to make a pocket, one pocket out of one and one pocket out of the other. See how it fares over time, because nothing like a little bit of experimentation.
Now, you did touch upon the concept of design for repairability. Mm-hmm. That must be probably what you see every day and can judge everything that comes in on that criteria. Well, was it made to be repaired?
The lack of design for repairability. The most frustrating thing isn't someone who's crashed into a barbed wire fence, because that's what happens when you're outside, or your dog's chewed it or whatever. It's what happens. the most irritating thing is getting something that has so deliberately been made for speed and not even thought about how to fix it. I mean, even things break in transit, what if you mess up at the final stage in the factory? It's cheaper for them to put the thing in the bin rather than to go back and add in. There was a shop I worked in, and we used to get returns and things to sell, and there was a pair of jeans they sent me to use for patches. It was literally missing a belt loop. That was all, one belt loop. And they were effectively going to put them in the bin because there was no point going back through the system. I think with design for repairability, it's being talked about a lot. I trust the brands who do their own repairs more. But I would say there's certain things that they don't, if it's either well out of warranty, so if it's something that happens when the item's really old, or if it's something that's really difficult to do. So say the item is £200 to replace, say the item is £200 in the shop. That means it's £100-ish for the brand to give to someone, if they lose their profit margin on it, with the shipping and everything. They don't want to spend more than £80 on the repair. And they'll probably tell their seamstresses that if it's £80, we'll just give them a new one. So those kinds of repairs don't always get fed back to design. They also, I think when people think about design for repairability, they assume that you need to take the thing fully apart rather than how do you get to something. So this is one I've talked about before. There was two jackets I did at the same time, and one of them, the pieces had been overlocked together and then sewn together, and the other one, they'd overlocked pieces independently, and you wouldn't be able to tell from the wear. It had no effect on the look of the thing, on how it sat on the hanger, anything like that. It was more expensive. It was a Patagonia jacket, the one that was independently overlocked, but it just made it that much easier to repair. It was in the guts of the thing. So I think the most important thing is how do I get it apart as easily as possible? So poppers are a real pain, or eyelets, because they get put in at the last minute and mean you can't get something inside out and you can't get into a seam. So if you can put a popper on a flap, that makes it a lot better. Or if you can just put it on one side, so all of the fixtures and fittings need to be as independent as possible, if that makes sense. Yeah. Zips, that's the number one thing that needs to be thought about, how you're going to take the zip out, because about 60 to 70% of what I do is zips, which means 70% of the time the thing that fails is going to be the zip. So if there's any garment designer who wants advice on how to make the thing repairable, it's assumed that the zip is going to need to be replaced at some point. Gluing them in is a complete pain. Glue is my enemy. It gets everywhere. It looks awful when you take it apart. Often when it comes, if the glue comes apart from the zip or the fitting or whatever, it changes shape, so it's hard to get it back together again. And also it means they don't, sometimes you've got like a raw edge and it's got some tape or coating around it, and that'll just come off, and then you're just left with a really thin piece of fabric with a raw edge. And then the final one is seam allowances. For repairing, the bigger the seam allowance, the more room you've got, the more place you've got to hide stuff if you want to, put an extra patch in or something. The bigger it is, the less risk there is that you're going to damage it while you take it apart, because sometimes as you're unpicking the seam, the whole piece of fabric will start to unravel, and it just makes it last longer in the first place. That's the biggest difference I've seen between backpacks, is seam allowance. You can literally line them up in order of seam allowance on the table if you've got 10 backpacks, and they'll be in age order.
Wow, that's interesting. So they've basically been skimping on fabric as they become newer. Skipping
on fabric, laser cutting now. Cutting's got so accurate now, and machines with guides on them, so it makes it much easier for the seamstress or seamster to push it through accurately. So I don't know if you've seen it, I keep talking about them, but Arc'teryx did a really cool video on how they repair stuff. And because they really focus on weight, they trim their seam allowances down to nothing. And they did a wonderful job repairing this thing. But they had it on the film. They were putting it through this machine that you couldn't do it by hand. There was no way I could have done it on one of my machines without this guide to push it through against. It basically takes the whole fabric for you. You just sit there and push the pedal. And it was less than a mil. It was so close to the edge. But yeah, it was a bit, you could tell that's how it had broken in the first place, but only someone who can sew would have seen it. So yeah, anyway.
Yeah, I imagine you mentioned that the zips were 60 to 70% of what you do. I imagine sort of Velcro cuffs probably comes in pretty high on the chart as well. But if they'd used better zips and Velcros and cuffs and poppers and whatnot to start with, the jacket must have lasted a few years extra.
People are usually quite down on Velcro. But in my experience, firstly, it doesn't go completely. It goes gradually, whereas a zip just goes. When a zip stops working, it stops working. But if you think of a button or a popper, sometimes will just go. But often it'll it feels a bit wrong. Oh, this is annoying. And it broke. Whereas a zip will be fine and then it will just burst, or you'll just lose the slider. That's it. There's no backup. Whereas the Velcro, over time, it starts to fray. Velcro is often quite easy to replace as well because of just the way it's sewn on, and because you've got two sides. Often if I'm having to replace Velcro, I'm only replacing one side. So on that 20-year-old jacket, the zip was gone. The Velcro, I've only had to replace the loop side. The hook side was still fine, and that was a size 8 really durable zip. So in that case, the zip had actually not lasted as long as the Velcro. We could use bigger zips and stop using these reverse coil zips. So they do have a use for the reverse coil waterproof zips. It's marginal really, because you've got a storm flap anyway. The thing is, they've done away with storm flaps, or they've done away with a lot of the flaps on pockets. So I do get it for waterproofness. I have a jar of sliders. Every time I replace a zip, I keep the slider just out of interest. And the jar is full of 5 and 3, size 5 and 3 reverse coil sliders. What bothers me the most is we're doing reverse coil. So that's when you know the traditional zip that coils up together, not the Vislon plastic bits that look like a jigsaw, but the coil up ones. Yeah. They flip them over so they look really neat now. That's literally the only reason. It's just aesthetics. But they last half as long, if not less, than normal coil zips. And any repairer will tell you that's the first thing. They should just ban them because they just break. If I could give anybody advice walking into a shop, if they're about to buy new gear, the bigger the zip, or go for the plastic zips, the Vislon ones, the click together, they'll always last longer than the reverse coil
Not metal
ones.
zips?
Yeah, you don't see them as much. I live near the sea, so I would avoid metal zips. It's easy to replace the slider on a zip, so don't worry about that. It's just the teeth. I find the Vislon ones last the longest, just from what I've seen here.
I was going to say about the Velcro that it lasts super well for a short period of time, and then it sort of lingers on for ages where it keeps just coming undone.
A little bit unravelled. What I'd like is if they made Velcro with an edge, because it always unravels from the side. And I'm sure there's a way to seal the edge better. If you could have my dream, it sounds like it's all I think about, but is a Velcro.
I wouldn't judge you if it was.
A piece of Velcro surrounded by fabric. So it didn't, because as soon as you start sewing it, you risk it beginning to fray.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Obviously not designed to be used.
Yeah. I mean, it is fantastic stuff, and it does work. It's great if you're cold because you don't need to match something. It's great for kids. It's great for anybody with reduced mobility. it's super adjustable as well. So rather than having to do multiple poppers, I use much more Velcro than I thought I would. When I first started, I thought, oh, I'm not convincing you.
You're not selling it as a very cool idea.
No, it's not. No, as a practical thing. If you're going for beauty, I would go for poppers or zips.
Now, you mentioned some of these brands now who are offering their own repair services. A lot of that, I think, is sort of they're taking responsibility for their product, being environmentally conscious and so forth. Any thoughts about that?
It does also help them hold on to customers. I think for any brand that's thinking of doing it, I think sometimes there's this idea that we might be shooting ourselves in the foot by doing repairs because that means someone isn't going to buy a new thing. But if they have one of your items and it's broken and it clearly has your branding on it, the chances of them going back into the shop and buying exactly the same one, when they're at this stage, they're disappointed about it, they're going to go into the shop and say, my ... jacket has broken. Do you have anything else? Whereas if they can ring up the brand and say, can you fix this? It absolutely is hugely a customer loyalty thing. I think the brand I used to do it for, the biggest benefit to the company of doing it was customer loyalty, because it would turn a bad customer into an incredibly loyal one, because now they're going to walk around and say, oh, they looked after me, they fixed my jacket, oh, I love ... So they've gone from a negative to a positive. I think there is a lot of greenwashing, unfortunately, surrounding repairs. I think admitting that it's broken because they've skimped on the design or because they haven't designed for durability would be better than offering repairs and posting about it on Instagram. But it is fantastic, and I always tell people, if it's in warranty, go and get it done with the brand or go and complain about it, because I see so many repeat offenders, and especially if a brand's doing it for free, or repairs don't have a huge margin, so a brand would rather sell a jacket than repair the thing. They're going to make more money from selling a jacket, so they've got to have other benefits from, so like customer loyalty, whatever. But if they can get design feedback from their own items, it's only going to improve. I really think long term, if repairs become, I mean, they're becoming, but if it becomes a mainstream thing that people expect from a brand, I'll buy this jacket, it breaks, I'll just assume that they have a repair policy, I'll assume that I can get it done, it's only 3 years old, then that brand is going to start paying attention to what they're doing. I don't know if you follow Mystery Ranch. They do backpacks in the US, kind of.
No.
They do quite technical stuff and they do military stuff as well. But I heard a guy talking from the repair department, and he's just a booth down from design, and he'll go around to design and slam a backpack on the desk, be like, excuse me, why did you do this? Which I love that idea that, yeah, it gets fed back. I think, interestingly, people have said to me, oh, surely you don't want to support brands doing repairs because that's bad for your business. The worst thing for my business is gear that isn't worth repairing. If it's either really hard to repair, which means it's going to cost a lot of money, or it's only got another year's left. If someone brings me a jacket and it's completely delaminated and it needs a new zip, I will tell them. I've done it maybe 2 or 3 times now. I've done a jacket that was completely delaminated, and I told the person, and I said, it's not waterproof anymore. And I said, I'm going to use it as a windbreaker. It's a sentimental thing. Please, 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 please. But I won't do something unless I think it's going to last another 2-3 years. There's just no point, because they know where I am. Come find me.
But I suppose for brands offering repairs, that must be a bit of a double-edged sword for them, because if you've broken it yourself, they'll say that they won't repair it because you've broken it. Either you've just plain misused it, or you've washed it, or you've broken it in some way. We had this problem with a down jacket. Not a down jacket, in fact, that my wife has. One with synthetic, the new sort of synthetic down, where it was just collapsing in the chambers. And then they said, well, try washing it, which completely shagged it.
Oh, no. What happened? Did the stitching pop, or did it was just sinking?
It just went all lumpy inside this synthetic filling. I forget, but it's one of these brand name fillings, but it broke completely, so they refunded us. What was I saying? Yes, brands. I mean, first they would try to tell you that you've broken the product yourself.
Yeah.
So they won't have to repair it.
Yeah.
Because if you've not broken it yourself, they are admitting that the product was faulty.
Yeah. Which is really,
kind of is something they don't want to say.
No. But I think a lot of people don't feel very listened to with outdoor gear. I'm amazed at how many people will tentatively ask if I can make something for them. Is there any way I can alter it for them? We're so not used to gear being perfect for us. People will tell me all the time, oh, no, stuff never fits me around the waist. You've gone out and spent over £100 on a pair of trousers that don't fit. Oh, yeah, but it never fits me. I'm weird. We don't like to demand a lot. And I think because we've got used to not being special. When you used to go into a tailor's shop, you were a really important customer because without you, they wouldn't be in business. Whereas the big brands, without you, but that's not actually true. Without you, that many times over, they wouldn't be in business. And I think with the power of social media now, you can actually make quite a fuss. I think people don't complain enough. And I think if we made more of a fuss, brands would... I've seen a chain of emails before. It was a really lovely lady. And I won't tell you the brand because it was quite... Yeah, it was pretty bad on their behalf. Lovely old lady. Is there any way you could fix this zip on my son's jacket? I just bought it a year ago and he's barely used it. Absolutely not. This is clearly a fault. Back and forth. And I was writing the emails for her. And email number 5, they agreed to do it for free. But they were really trying to convince her it was her fault. And it was a tiny zip. It was just not sufficient for the jacket. And they hadn't top stitched the lining. So the lining had caught in the slider on like the second wear. It was a definite common fault that they got all the time. They knew the person sitting there would have seen that photo before. But people are... I've also heard designers be quite harsh. Somebody said to me, people don't know how to use zips. That's why they break all the time.
Yeah, right.
If they don't know how to use zips, then we need to reinvent the zip so that people know how to use them. Because these people can drive cars. So I'm thinking they should probably know how to use it. There's misuse, but then that's what design is there for. You're supposed to design something for ease of use. But I'm nearly always on the customer side. I'm quite mean on the brands.
Regarding how we're all different shapes and heights and weights and whatever, I mean, it used to be a thing where you could actually go to an outdoor tailor and order, say, your expedition gear or your mountaineering gear or so forth. There must still be places offering that today. Or are we also romanced by the big brand names that we'll just accept that their stuff doesn't fit us?
I don't know. I don't know if it's the lure of the advertising. If you look at, an amazing video produced by a huge brand, it just looks really exciting. You walk into a shop and it's huge and it's overwhelming and you feel like you're part of something because you're part of this huge club. I think it's changing. I think people, with the way people are going with vintage, I think people are sick of, my generation definitely, are sick of looking like everybody else. I can't be the only person who's walked down the high street when I was at uni in Glasgow and seen someone walking the other way in not one of the same pieces of clothing, but 2. So you had the same coat and boots as me. Because everybody's shopping at the same high street, especially when the internet was just taking off. You had, these huge name high street retailers and everybody's shopping in the same 5 shops. And if you have a specific style and a specific fit, you go to you're shopping in the same shop. So I think it's coming back. It's never gone completely. Savile Row's still there, still going. There's definitely been a bit of we can't call it a resurgence, but growth in the suit fitting for women. I remember seeing an article on the first first person on Savile Row to do suits for women, custom suits. And yeah, I looked them up, and the article was a few years old, and there's already more of them. So I think custom stuff is coming back. I don't know what an increase in price will do. I think it sounds counterintuitive, but I think people could spend more because they think more about what they're spending. I think a lot of this throwaway fast fashion culture has come from disposable income. You've had time on a Saturday to go shopping. If you now have a second job on a Saturday, you don't go shopping. You don't have time to go out for drinks, so you don't need a new dress. But when you do, it's a really, you might club together several birthday presents and get yourself one jacket. I don't know if that's my hope anyway, that it's going to go the other way. But I think I do find sometimes I convince people don't realise it's possible to have something fitted, even though they remember their mum making them a pair of trousers when they were a kid, or their grandma making them a cardigan that, had extra long sleeves because they got long arms. But they kind of don't think it's possible. I don't know, sewing has become so invisible. If you ask anybody do you know anyone who sews? They'll say possibly their grandma. But you'd have to go to Lancashire or Nottingham to easily find people who knew industrial seamstresses, people who made, clothes on a larger scale or complicated clothes.
The Great British Sewing Bee had no impact at all.
It's had a massive impact. I definitely think home sewing. Yeah, I don't see them though. They don't come to me. So I very rarely meet seamstresses because they just do their own thing.
Yeah. Well, I think one thing the Sewing Bee did show was that with quite limited means, basically a sewing machine and a little gumption, you could do great stuff.
It's so liberating as well to make clothes that fit you and that you want to wear. I've had a complete revelation in how I dress since I started. So I made clothes when I was a kid with my mum. And my grandma, well, one grandma was a commercial seamstress and the other one was a quilter. And then I didn't really do it when I was at uni. And then it was in lockdown. All my clothes were up in Scotland and I was in Cornwall. So I had no summer clothes. And the fabric shops did very well in COVID. Everybody who sewed went, this is what we've been preparing for this whole time. So yeah, I got really into it then. And it was just so liberating. Like, it wasn't this horrible experience every time I went to the shop that the thing I wanted wasn't there in size, or I was wrong, or it was the wrong colour, or whatever. It's so nice making your own clothes. And I think because it's so personal, because it's literally right next to your skin. It's really lovely making a wall hanging, but making yourself a warm cardigan feels, very satisfying. It's like chopping wood. It's being self-sufficient, I think. But
plus, you can make it properly.
Yeah. And if you don't, you find out, and then you do. Because every sewer has made something that they thought was great, and 10 minutes later they've bent down to the fridge to pick something up and gone, oh, whoops, should have double stitched there.
Yeah. Left a bit more seam allowance.
Yeah.
A question I was asked to ask by a friend: what is best of down filling and polyester filling, or synthetic versus natural?
There are so many podcasts and articles on this topic. They can read for at length. The short answer is down can be warmer, but synthetic's better if you're going to get soggy. So if it's going to rain. For the UK, my other half hates down. He's a complete synthetic convert. He thinks it's brilliant, but he also is quite warm, so he gets quite sweaty. So he doesn't like the heat of the down. So it's a little bit of personal preference as well. But it just depends how wet they're going to get. Are they in Norway? Are they going to be in the snow?
No. In fact, he's in England.
Oh, okay.
But,
for Britain, if there's a risk that they're going to get a shower, I would say synthetic is better.
Right, because then you're thinking that the damp will actually come into the filling.
Yeah. So down is really affected by damp, but the synthetic carries on keeping you warm. So as soon as the feathers, they're saying that they've now got hydrostatic or whatever special feathers that are better. But you can do it. Take a handful of feathers and put them under the tap, and take a handful of synthetic wadding and put it under the tap. And you can imagine the difference between the two.
I think they'd both be pretty nasty.
Yeah.
It is interesting though that they are developing both types fully still. They're
kind of converging now, because you're getting the synthetic down that acts like down and looks like feathers, rather than just having like a kind of wadding sheet. It's actually feels like feathers. I haven't seen that performing in the wet.
You don't get any impression seeing the older jackets that have been used a lot. There's no difference to how well they stand up over time.
It's difficult to say because down's been around longer. So the older stuff, I'd say probably down. The old down is more durable. So I think it was Rab used to have a service where you could send in your old sleeping bag. They would take the down out, make you a new sleeping bag, and put your old down back in, because the down lasted longer than the fabric. And now they offer a restuffing service because the down collapses. So I don't know if it's fair to say down lasts longer without comparing modern down and old school down. But I don't know if that's because they've got different breeds or because they're more picky with which feathers they take, because obviously they only take the softest ones. And the old down is definitely, it's crunchy sometimes when you press on it. They definitely took bigger feathers, but...
Yeah, not really fair to ask that question because it's such a big question. There's so many caveats. Right, yeah. Now, you did mention the fact that they're not allowed to use DWR, durable water resistance, is it?
Like that.
Repellent.
Yeah. I'm not sure if it's all. I don't know if it's some. I'm not sure the whole technical. I can't remember all the words. Chemistry was,
because that was the carbon 6 fluorocarbon repellents, which causes massive amounts of cancer and all sorts of nasty stuff.
It's pretty bad for frogs as well, I think. I think it's bad for frogs. I remember reading that somewhere.
I think it's bad for everyone.
Yeah.
But we've been happily using them for years and years and years.
Yeah.
Do you know anything about... I keep seeing these green water repellents, environmentally friendly versions. They never sort of get into specifics of how they work. And I don't know how well they work, but I'm curious.
I'm not sure how well they work, but I would say the ones I've seen, the jackets I've seen with the modern versions on them, are greasier. They definitely don't repel oils as well, from what I've seen. But I don't know how... that could be that there's just more development on the way and they could be as good in 3 years' time. But certainly for the moment, when I've had two jackets next to each other and one's been the nasty stuff, it's always cleaner. And it's grease more than anything that it doesn't seem to repel as well. But I don't know if that's because... I don't know if that's one of those things that if you washed it more, then, you need to learn to wash it more because it doesn't have the magic coating on it. Or because it has the organic one. One thing, I don't know how relevant it is, you don't have to include it, is I find a lot of companies... It really bothers me how there are sustainable, ethical fashion companies or outdoor gear companies who claim that they make all this stuff in the UK or they make it ethically and blah, 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 blah. And they're based somewhere bonkers. And they just have a factory making it for them. Which, okay, they can ask the right questions and everything. And I'm all for, not everybody has to be everything from the designer to the maker to the shop. I understand that. But there's a lot of people who like to make the impression that they make it themselves, but they don't. And now that I've been in this business, I can tell within minutes whether somebody makes something themselves or they don't. from their branding, from their Instagram, you just have to look on their about page. And if there's no photo of a sewing machine, anybody who owns a sewing machine wants to show it off. I have a bar tacker that's worth $3,000. I want to show it off. I want to tell people I've got it. Like, I'm working on an update on the website, and, a lot of people who've got a bar tacker will be front and centre of their main page. And you can tell people who don't, because they'll be really vague about their manufacturing processes, and they won't use sewing language. And I think it's not that the problem isn't that they don't make the stuff themselves. The problem is that they like to give people the impression that they do, and also that they like to give people the impression that they know how to sew themselves, which means the gear is better. But it's not, because they don't. They are giving a factory a tech pack at most. Sometimes they're outsourcing that. Sometimes they're giving a sketch to a garment technologist who's creating a tech pack, who's sending that to the factory.
For those who don't know what a tech pack is,
I learnt this recently. I have not gone to fashion school. I went to boat engineering school.
Boat engineering?
No, I just went to Strathclyde University. I did naval architecture, but yeah, boat engineering. So it's basically a sheet of paper, and it will just describe what's it. So you can go as in depth or as vague as you want. The vaguer you go, the more they'll just use off the shelf or have their standard practice. So they'll have this is how we normally do pockets if they don't specify. So you can say needs to be a size 8 zip, needs to be this length, needs to start here, the stitch length needs to be this, you need to bar tack here, you need to double stitch here, and you need to overlap this part. Or you can just say, here's a picture, make sure that looks like that, make sure those seams are, done up to the side. And you can be pretty vague, I think. I've never actually put one together, but I've seen the finished ones.
Yeah, and I suppose there are enough factories around the world who know how to make stuff, so you can just say, I'll have model 3 in red.
Yeah.
Make it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then just take care of all the important marketing.
Kathy from Joe Brown's, she said it really well the other day. She said there's 2 ways to make outdoor gear. One, you can get a catalogue, and you can go, I'll have that one in red, and I want my logo on the chest. Right. Or you can have an in-house designer. Design team, presumably. Maybe just a single designer. But yeah, there's an awful lot of people who just slap a logo on it and then will bag on about their manufacturing, and they don't. So it's worth, if you read anything, whether it's about manufacturing, whether it's about being ethical, being sustainable, their repair policy, whatever, just think about who's writing it and what they have to gain from writing it. Because it's probably not the repairer. It's probably not somebody who's, an avid Greenpeace supporter. It's somebody from the marketing team. And what have they been told to do? What are their objectives? What are they going to get pulled up if they don't do? How are they going to get their bonus this year? We like to think that everybody does things out of niceness, but they don't. At the end of the day, we all need to feed our families first. And I think this is where we need to make a case, not just of doing the right thing, but it's the most sensible thing to do. I think this is why I like to argue all the other points for doing repairs, not just that it is better for the planet, but that it's better for the customer. It's a better customer experience. It's better for gear design in general. There's so many other reasons. There's the feedback to design. It's just logical. But it's cheaper often. It's cheaper for the brand even to not long term. It's cheaper for the brand.
Depends whether you're building a brand long term or whether you just have 250 jackets you want shot of.
That you need to. And I think a lot of the quotas, and not even quotas, but whatever they need to fulfill, it's done monthly. It's so quick. It's not, if I had started this and needed to grow at a certain pace and had objectives and had, a meeting with investors, after 6 months, they would have been really disappointed in me. But after 8 months, they would have been really impressed, but it wouldn't have done any difference. It wouldn't have made a difference if it had been a 6-month check-in. So people are forcing themselves to grow so quickly that they're not. I've met so many people who I thought I was going to have to convince people to get repairs done. There are a few people who they'll be a bit hesitant at first whether it's worth it. And after one repair, they'll be like, oh, this is so easy. This makes so much sense. Oh, this is great. Can you do this? What about this? Can you do this? But there's been people, the group of people that I didn't expect, and the ones who convinced me that it was worth starting a full-time business on this, was the people who just went, oh, thank God. Finally, someone who's listening to me, somebody who actually wants me to design. And I thought, this is mad, because these people are dressed head to toe in outdoor gear brands, and they're so frustrated at what the brands are doing.
Yeah. This must be a bit similar to the way Barbour and other wax jacket companies market their jackets as rewaxable, but the customers really don't have an idea of what that involves. So you'll say to someone who has a jacket obviously in need of care, and they'll just, well, how does that happen? But it was also important what you were saying about who writes the marketing blurb and why they write it like they do, because I've been thinking a lot lately about how difficult it is to go into a shop and buy something, because I'm so hard to convince when I'm selling myself on an idea. But reading stuff written online is so much more convincing.
Yeah.
And naturally, it's because I'm not doing it myself. It's a professional marketer who's convincing me.
Possibly somebody with a degree in psychology as well.
Using all the buzzwords.
Yeah, definitely.
Now,
but it's interesting that you say about... Oh, no, sorry, carry
on. No, go on.
What about wax jackets, about people not knowing what's involved? I found out about Frostline kits a little while ago. And have you ever come across them? They were really big in the 80s and 90s, where people did a lot of home sewing. So a lot of women that age would have made their own wedding dresses. Everybody would probably remember having watched someone do a repair, whether it was their grandma, their dad, whoever. They would have remembered seeing, there would be a needle and thread in the house somewhere. So people were used to sewing, and suddenly there was this explosion in interest in the outdoor industry, and there were other fabrics coming onto the market, so the synthetic fabrics that were easier to sew with, because wax canvas was pretty hard to get through a domestic machine. So they were kind of exciting developments, but they were really expensive. So it made sense to make your own gear. And there was this there was a huge industry in selling these kits, and they would sell you, it was like a down by numbers. They would number which baffle, they'd give you these little pockets of down, and you'd stuff them in the down jacket, and they'd cut the pieces to size, and then you just kind of sewed it up at home. And then one way or another, I looked them up all on Wikipedia, and one by one they all went bust. And for whatever reason, people stopped home sewing. Anyway, I kept thinking about it, and it wasn't till weeks later I was listening to a podcast, and someone said the downfall of home sewing, of home outdoor gear making, was Gore-Tex and seam sealing, and that nobody had any idea of how to do it. And it just seemed you needed this huge machine, and you couldn't see how something was put together anymore. If something has a lining, often it's pretty rough on the inside because you're not going to see it. So you take out the lining and the whole thing makes sense, and you can figure it out. So if it rips, there's even a chance that you're going to work out what's wrong with it. But a lot of waterproofs people bring in and go, I have no idea what you do with this, because I can't see any stitching. It's invisible because it's all, hidden behind tape. I've got a heat press, but you can actually get away with a lot on a home iron. I think it was this fabric, this magic new fabric and magic new stuff came at the same time as stuff was being offshored. So there's a group of, there's types of clothing, and there's also ways of making things, so like seam sealing or overlocking, that people really... I said something about overlocking to my grandma. I never had one of those. The machine I have was made when she was sewing. It's older than my overlocker is older than her, but it was still new technology, so people don't understand how it was made. So either the jackets that we're wearing now haven't existed for long enough that people know how to make them because they've all been made overseas, but also it's so hidden that it's just, once you start doing it, it's scary, but once you start taking a pair of scissors to stuff or an unpicker to stuff, it's really not that complicated. It's just not taught in traditional sewing books.
Yeah.
You've got to work it out on your own, and nobody wants to tell you about it because it's all very hush-hush now that it's in China.
Yeah, I guess the reason my Gore-Tex killed the home sewing though was that it sort of was the space age version, and it made everything else look old-fashioned and crap.
Yeah. Although, wait 5 years, and suddenly the home sewn one doesn't look so bad anymore.
Yeah, I guess there's a reason why. I mean, all this vintage army stuff and all the old mountain equipment, down jackets, and all the are so popular now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
because they have lasted.
It's what's really interesting is I remember my mum telling me years ago about my great grandmother got a new Aga, and it had some little handle door something on it, and it was where you would have had the fire, but now it was an electric one. But it was now a useless cupboard. It wasn't even like a heated cupboard. It was just a useless hole in the thing that they put there to remind you. So it was like a fake version of what used to be there. And I've seen it a few times now on old gear. It's made to look like it used to, but it's not actually made in the old way anymore. There was one that was like it was a little rivet, and before it was done through all the straps to hold a piece together, because I'd seen one of the old backpacks and they brought out, a limited edition run of these new ones, and the rivet was just on one layer. It was just to look like but it wasn't doing what it used to do. It's funny. It was just the look of vintage. But
so, being an experienced observer of stuff that has failed, do you have any tips for people buying stuff, for what to look for to have something that lasts a while?
So, first of all is zips. The bigger the zip, the better. Avoid the reverse coil ones if you can. A really common thing, so an early days thing. So there's things that break long term and things that break short term. Things that I used to get in for, I obviously don't see a lot of warranties because I'm private. But yeah, for when I used to work for a company, is draw cords pulling out because you're sewing a round thing to a flat thing. So if you can get to a shop, have a look at the thing in person. It's often much easier to see in person whether something's going to fall apart. I can't tell online what's going to break, but hand me something and I'll start pulling at it and it'll make a bit more sense. So anywhere where there's cords going in, have a yank on them, see if you can pull them out. If you break something in the shop, the brand's going to get the money back. If you break it on the hill, you might not. So put it through its first wear in the changing room. So pull on, it might have been made on a Friday. The people who are putting this stuff together are under a lot of pressure to go as fast as they can. So they might just be in a rush. They might be having a bad day. It's still a human hand at the end of the day, so mistakes can be made. So like even often when you get a popped seam, it's where they've changed the thread, but they haven't back tacked enough. You can see where it's a new thread that's come in. Or often on the inside seams of stuff, they'll actually use a bonkers colour because they're trying to get rid of I pulled apart a black jacket once, and the inside seams, the ones you couldn't see, were all sewn together with a rainbow thread that they must have just ordered by accident or something. So yeah, try and pull everything apart. Also, if you can, scratch fabrics. Often my test of if something's durable, literally scratch it with your fingernail and see if it starts to bobble, or if you can scratch through it. Some of the new fabrics you can literally pull the fibres, which is a bit scary. And then see what their repair policy is. And the better the repair policy, the better the reviews of the repairs, probably the better the item. Not always, it's not a rule. There's still Patagonia stuff that falls apart. But yeah, as a general guide, if you go on a brand's website and you can't find it, so sometimes you go on the website and at the top it says women's, men's, sizing about repairs, the best brands, or sometimes it's all the way at the bottom, or sometimes you have to Google it before you get there, or sometimes it doesn't exist at all.
And I guess some have a sort of repair policy where you can send it back to Bangladesh at your own cost. Well, usually
they're in the country. So Patagonia only fairly recently started doing repairs in the UK. because they couldn't find any UK-based repairers to do it, because it's so time-consuming. Anyway, that doesn't really make sense because it's a lot of money, but it's also, I think because it's so time-consuming, it doesn't make sense for the factories to do it, and it also isn't great. So in my workshop, everything's so close. I've got an overlocker there, I've got a needle feed there, and I've got all my different machines really close to me. In a factory, it'd be really hard to have one of everything really close to you. You usually have a repair department, but I don't think the Chinese factories are going to be that interested in doing repairs because it's one-offs.
No. That wasn't a flippant remark. I admit it. It was just to make returning repairs that much harder, so it would be such an effort that the customer wouldn't bother. They'd just give up and go away.
Okay, yeah. So if it says Bangladesh, it's probably a crap. I don't get what you mean now.
When you call the repair service and they never answer the phone or don't respond to emails or whatever.
Or if they have a really long wait time, because sometimes, I mean, my wait time is about a month at the moment. It's longer in the winter. But if they have 2 months long repair policy, they're probably not that interested in going through them. So, because in 2 months, I may as well get a new jacket then. But I would also say, going back to the durability thing, people really focused on lightweight gear, and it does have a time and a place, but I think people think of it as that's the pinnacle of technical gear. If it's lightweight, that means I'm best suited to, I'm wearing the best things I can to go up on this mountain. If you fall over, if you trip and fall when you're on a mountain and you rip your jacket open, or you bust the zip and now you've got a broken ankle, and you can't zip your jacket up, you're in quite a pickle. Or if your jacket breaks after 2 years and you didn't really want to go running anyway and it's raining, really think about if this jacket stopped working. It's not always the lightest gear isn't always going to get you up the hill the fastest or have you the best, make sure you have the best time or get you out the most. Sometimes it's the piece of gear that you can rely on the most that is the safest or the one that you're going to take every single time. This jacket I have of my mum's is ridiculously heavy, but I know I can't rip it. So if I'm going to go on a walk and I've looked at the map and we're a bit unsure and, are we going to have to go through that gorse? Is that gorse there? I'll take that jacket.
I have the same relationship with my old Fjällräven expedition.
Really?
If I slip and fall over, I know my fall will be dampened because there's that 6 inches of down that's protecting me. That's brilliant. Has the world of visible mending come into outdoor wear, or does everyone want it to be as invisible and as factory-like as possible?
I would credit Patagonia with nearly all of the desire to have colourful patches on stuff. Cotopaxi stuff is actually almost looks like it's been deliberately patched. I don't know if you've seen they've got like multicolour baffles. So their stuff's great to repair because it already looks a bit wacky. I find it's a little bit on the person, it's a little bit on the sport. Climbers, I definitely always want to look a bit wackier. And younger people usually want to look a bit different because I think, they're still in that, I don't know if it's a rebellious thing. But I'd say the biggest indicator is what brand they're wearing. And I'm still not quite sure why that is, but certain brands, if somebody's got, a really swish pair of a certain brand, they just want it to look like you've never been there. But if they've got, Patagonia,
Cavu, brands
Cotopaxi.
appeal to certain types of people.
Yeah,
because I can see Patagonia being more granola than Arc'teryx, say.
Yeah, definitely. Arc'teryx I've found of all of my customers, Arc'teryx want the cleanest, most invisible. It's a black patch on a black item, and they are really worried it's going to be obvious. And then you get someone phone up and say, have you got anything neon? You go, oh, apples and oranges.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I suppose regular listeners are now waiting for me to say something snarky about Patagonia, but I hadn't thought I would this time. I could say something about Patagonia being naturally virtue signalling and all this, but I'll leave off for this time. So,
the biggest thing they could do for all the talk about repairing is they could have a section of their website where you could buy fabric, zippers, buttons, poppers, spare down, toggles, all that stuff. I don't know why, when you get a shirt, it comes with a button. Why do jackets not come with a spare slider? They could sell it. They could make money from it.
Well, I actually do have jackets that have come with spare poppers and buttons.
Have you ever come across a spare slider?
Rare. No. And that would be helpful, because finding really the specific slider that would work with the zip that is on the jacket.
Yep. I have a huge box of sliders, and I have 4 different suppliers because it's so hard to get hold of the different sizes. If Patagonia really cared about everybody repairing their stuff, they would make it... Yes, having a needle and thread is great, but the majority of repairs I do actually don't require a needle and thread. They require tape, specific fabric, which is really hard to buy. It's really hard to, especially when they don't tell you on the label, because they don't want to give their secrets away. But by selling you the fabric, they don't need to give the secrets away. They can just give you a 30 centimetre piece. You can't rip them off and make a jacket out of 30 centimetres. But they could make all that stuff accessible, and then they could have a section that was for commercial repairers to buy a box of ... this many Patagonia items. Not if you exclusively repair Patagonia, but as an example to the rest of the industry. I've had Fjallraven have been really good. I emailed the guy and said, is there any chance I could get some of your G1000 for a knee patch? I'm forever doing Fjallraven knee patches. And he said, yeah, sure, right away, and gave me some. I'd love a roll because I do so many. But yeah.
I had a similar experience, it must be almost 10 years ago, when H&M, quality makers of slow fashion, but they did an amazing collection about 10 years ago, because it celebrated what must have been the 100th anniversary of when H and M came together, which was Hennes and Moditz. And they did a menswear collection based on vintage pieces from around that time. And it was great stuff. I still have quite a few of them. But they did some tweed trousers using, I think it was moon tweed from England. Now, at the time I was cycling to and from work, and it occasionally rained, and cycling in tweed trousers in the rain meant that there was a certain amount of wear on the posterior.
Yeah.
And I was at my most militant at the time, so I got in touch with H&M, and I was really pissed off. And I did not give up. And in the end, I was put in contact with the guy who had designed the trousers.
Oh, wow.
And he actually had a patch of the tweed in his desk drawer, which he sent me, so I could repair them.
That's really good.
So that is one point in time when I'd actually like to give them credit for
that's really good.
doing well.
It's nice to find a person on the other end as well, a face behind the brand, because it's easy to just think of them as big companies and not.
It does make them seem a little more human.
Yeah.
Most customer services are so immensely annoying. I mean, I don't know what their job interviews are like, but it must be something like, are you immensely annoying as a person? Do you hate people? Can you send the same email reply again and again and again and not listen? Okay, you're hired. Thanks.
Yeah. I used to, this company I used to work for, I used to get people from customer services, and I ended up, for a little while, there was someone in customer services that I think just was winding people up. And I said, can you send me the person's phone number because it's easier to explain? And I would phone the person up and I go, hi, it's so-and-so from HelpKit. And they go, oh, sorry, I've said their name. You can take that out. I'm sure that maybe they won't mind. And they go, oh, God, yeah, what is it? And I'd say, I'm from repairs. I want to talk about your ... jacket or whatever. They go, really? Do you? It was are you a real person? Do you care? Do you know my name? It was just the sheer amazement that I actually wanted to. Because I think at the end of the day, I don't know. I would get handed someone and they would say, oh, this person's really irritating, ... They want, and they're being ridiculous. And I'd get the thing, and sometimes they were. I got the odd person, and, you know, they'd been to Tibet and back with a bike bag, and they were furious that it was broken. They'd had it for 16 years.
Oh.
Why is it broken? Well, but you'd also get people kind of sheepishly saying, oh, I can't believe this is broken. And I'd seen it 100 times already. It wasn't them at all. It was a manufacturing error.
Yeah.
And customer services, I think, were just trained to say, this person's being irritating. I think the world has become, because it's all so much bigger and it's so much less personal, and customers are more disposable, but so are brands, there's a lot less loyalty back and forth. There's a lot less, hi, I know you made this, but I think you made a mistake. Is there any possibility you could fix it? Oh, yes, absolutely, Jeremy. How are the kids? That doesn't happen anymore. I think when people have come to me when I've done something they didn't, on the rare occasion I've misunderstood or whatever, they're really apologetic.
Yeah.
And then I'm really apologetic, and we immediately assume that the other person's in the right and we're in the wrong, and it's all sorted out really swiftly because they're definitely not disposable to me, and there's not many repairers in the UK, so I think I'm probably fairly indisposable to them.
There you go. In closing, Rosanna,
Yes.
anything you'd like to mention? Anything we haven't covered?
I don't think so. Talked quite a lot. I would say if anyone's interested in doing their own repairs, YouTube is a fantastic resource. Patagonia have got some videos, and iFixit is really good as well. Of anything that's a really therapeutic and really satisfying repair is, we're just talking about at the start, is darning. If you want to get started with repairs, it's quite scary to attack a down coat, but knitwear, because you can completely undo it, and you know, if you mess up, I've redone darns. The first few I did, I've redone now, and it's really lovely to do. It's very satisfying. There's a lovely lady, I'm going to pronounce it wrong now. She's called something Colleenwood Norris, and she has a beautiful book called Visible Creative Mending, I think it's called. I'd highly recommend that to anyone that wants to get into repairs.
Inspiring words indeed. Okay, Rosanna, thanks a lot for being my guest today.
Thank you for having me. It's very funny to finally talk to you, having listened to the podcast so much.
That is really weird to hear, because I have so little feedback, and
Yeah. Oh, no, it's
I
really
quite rarely hear from people who do listen, so I do wonder.
No, it's very interesting. I've enjoyed it through my sewing journey so far.
Okay, bye-bye for now.
Bye for now.
And that's all for this week's episode of Garmology. If you'd like to check out my guest further, there's links in the show notes. There's also links to how you can support the pod by buying me a cup of coffee, which is perfectly optional. I'm just pleased you're listening. If you'd like to get in touch, suggest a guest, just let me know what you think. It's welldresseddad@gmail.com. You can follow me on Instagram as welldresseddad. So, until next week, bye-bye.